What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of On Cue. I'm your host, Rich Quinones, and with the regular season in the NFL done, Black Monday has come and gone. A lot of movement with the coaching carousel. It's going to be an absolutely wild offseason. Who better to break it down? I mean, we can talk offense, we can talk defense, we can talk hiring process and candidates and how to get it done. The former All-Pro and, of course, Pro Bowl, the great James Hasty, obviously, with the New York Jets, of course, his Kansas City Chiefs in action, weather permitting, we like to kind of laugh and say, right? That's going to be
It's gonna be a little nippy. It's
yeah,
gonna be a little nippy
yeah,
this weekend.
doozy of a game. But and of
Man,
course, the passion project, the architect behind CPAS. But James, my friend, always good to catch up. Happy belated New Year. And I guess as a former player, it's got to be a very interesting time for you from a former player standpoint with the playoffs, but also what you're doing with CPAS with the movement right now in the NFL with these head coaches just falling, left and right. The dominoes are just, I mean, I can't,
yeah,
you tell me, I can't
yeah.
recall a wilder last 4 days in the NFL.
You've got, complete coaching staff rebuilds. You've got offensive staff rebuilds. I've never seen so many openings right now in the National Football League. It's the craziest times, and of course, some of the Hall of Fame coaches that we've seen now that are out there with the Jim Harbaughs and Belichicks and the Carrolls. It's just you got a good group of coaches out there. I don't know if Pete's going to keep coaching or not, but you've got some really good coaches out there that deserve an opportunity. Looking
Listen,
forward to it.
no one likes to see coaches lose, anyone lose their job. And I thought, I just thought a team like Atlanta, obviously with Arthur Smith needed a change, right? I mean, you saw him go
Yeah,
after Allen after
yeah.
what transpired with New Orleans. We know
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
we talked a little bit about Carolina. We've talked at length what's going on in DC, Del Rio, and then Ron Rivera. We don't know what's going to happen with Bieniemy. We'll get into that in a couple moments. And then you got Mike Grable. Wasn't as shocked as others are. I thought going in, he was going to be on the hot seat. I think that organization is really in flux right now because you're going to lose Henry, the running back. You don't have a quarterback. I think Grable is a very good head coach. I think he's also a very good coordinator. Could open up a slot now in New England with him, with Belichick and the Patriots parting ways. You got the Pete Carroll news. I mean, out of all of what transpired over the last 2 to 3 days, what surprised you the most when it comes to head coaches being let go, whether it's unceremoniously or not?
I guess due to my relationship with Pete, having played for Pete for a number of years, that was surprising the most to me, right? Pete's full of energy, but I think the understanding going into this year was that they needed to make the playoffs, and Pete's such a competitor that you're going to have to drag him out of there and before he'll walk away from the game. He loves the game that much, and I just hate to see Pete step away. But it's that time, and you've got to celebrate all the things that he's done collegiately and professionally. He did some phenomenal things for the game of football, and just the players that he developed and all the great relationships and all that. So I think the Pete Carroll firing was it was the most difficult to see happen yesterday.
So correct me if I'm wrong. He was with the Vikings as defensive back coach mid 80s, then with the Jets as DC, what was about 3 years, and then he took over the helm in 94, was it?
Right, right,
Okay. He's a
right.
young 72. I mean,
Very young 72. You know what I
I,
mean? And maybe it's ageism or something going on where they're pushing guys out. But there's nothing that told me that this guy couldn't go out and compete with the young coaches even. So I'm a little taken back by the fact that he was being forced out like that. There's no reason. I mean, you can go back and look at several games this year and look at some of the opportunities that they had slip away defensively. They didn't play well. They had their moments offensively, but to point the finger to Pete it's a tough deal to see happen.
my buddy shot me a text yesterday and he's like, I don't get it. These guys 70, 72, 73, 71. It's almost
Right.
like the new 60, right? The new
Yeah.
55. I mean, Do you think a guy like Pete Carroll, a defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, who obviously butted heads with Brian Dable, we talked about this during the season with the Giants and getting the right staff around. Belichick, I tweeted out that, and I posted it, every coach has a shelf life, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. At the end of the day,
coaches, everybody.
Yeah. It's inevitable that it's going to end sometime. I mean, to me, Pete Carroll would be a guy you can probably stick in a studio because.
Oh, no question. He's going to give you everything you want.
Yeah.
When it comes to breaking the film down, to, talking about the things that are behind the scenes that are ongoing, the draft and free agent. I mean, there's just so much that just through his personality that he brings to the table. And, the energy is authentic. It's real. It's not, it's really, that's the person that you're seeing on the sideline, the celebrating, all of that's genuine. And that's hard to find in today's game. It's really difficult to find.
Yeah, it's a great point you bring up, because then you've got the antithesis of that in a Bill Belichick, where if you throw him a question, the returner or the gunner missed a block, or the returner, muffed a punt, he'll go into a 25-minute to an hour diatribe on special teams because he's such a savant when it comes to the game of football. And I believe what he accomplished in New England, and I'm not going to overshadow, everyone's talking about, Belichick, Brady, chicken or the egg. It's a collaborative effort. And what they were able to accomplish with that dynasty and that run of success, I don't believe it can be ever repeated, especially in the sport of football.
I agree with you. To do what they did. I mean, remember, don't forget they were one game away from going undefeated, right? And that was a phenomenal feat, as we all know, with the Dolphins, what they'd done back in '72. So the fact that they lost that Super Bowl and they could have went undefeated, that was a huge scenario that in and of itself. So, all the things that he's done over the years, the consistency, you knew what you were going to get in those press conferences. You weren't going to get much. But the impact that he's had on the game is just that it's phenomenal. And I don't believe we'll ever see that again, because the game of football, as we know, it's constantly changing, and it's becoming more and more difficult to win a Super Bowl. So 6 just seems like just out of the norm.
Yeah, I mean, you almost equate it to what the Celtics were able to do with their dynasties in the 50s and the 60s, and then the Lakers in the 80s and whatnot, and the Bulls in the 90s. I mean, different sports, obviously, but still, it's a ridiculous feat and accomplishment. I still believe he's going to coach because he wants to surpass Don Shula. And again, I know it's kind of early in this, but so it's kind of a two-pronged question here. So what you're doing with CPAS and what you've created, you've got all these young coordinators now that are looking around and they're like, oh, hey, man, there's a vacancy here. There's a vacancy in Carolina. There's a vacancy maybe with the Raiders. There's a vacancy with the Chargers, Washington, New England, the Titans.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
It's got to be rough for them at this moment, because who's out there? Harbaugh, Belichick, Grable, and Carroll, right? So I'm wondering what kind of advice, what would you kind of tell them, and take it to what you're doing? And how
are we talking about the older? Are we talking about?
I'm talking about these younger guys first and foremost.
Or the younger group, the Slowicks, the Kafkas, the Steve Wilkes, the Eric Bieniemys, the Aaron Glenns, the Ben Johnsons. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, so what would, if you were talking to these guys right now in a room, what kind of advice would you give them? And how can you incorporate CPAS into this, where the old school thinking is just retread some of these guys, the ones that I mentioned? How can these younger guys maybe get a leg up and not have to worry about the Harbaughs, the Carrolls,
stealing all the good coaches, right?
I mean, think about that.
You're left with the remains, basically.
Yeah,
right?
here's my resume, right?
Yeah,
with a young guy, and then here's these guys' resumes.
right. No, it's slim pickings out there right now, Rich. I'm gonna tell you, it's slim pickings. Looking for an offensive coordinator, good luck. looking for a defensive coordinator, good luck. I mean, there's very few good ones out there right now. So if you've got an opportunity to put your group together and put it together very quickly, one that involves the owner being in that selection process, because I would not recommend any coach going to a meeting with an owner, introductory meeting with an owner, saying, here's my coaching staff. Don't do that anymore. Go in there and with the understanding that you're going to involve the owner in this process, right? Because what's happening is these owners have allowed these coaches to go in and build their staffs almost in a way where if they do decide to get rid of the head coach, man, they leave such a hole in the organization, because if you fire Josh McDaniels, you got to fire Ziegler, and you got to fire Carmen. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
You gotta replace your offensive coordinator in Lombardi, yep. Right? Mick Lombardi. So now you've got this huge hole. So if Mark Davis would have been involved in the selection process, he wouldn't have his organization wouldn't have been as devastated by these three positions opening up, yep. Once he fired one guy, right? So I would encourage the coaches that are going in to meet with these organizations, go in there and pitch yourself and talk about the importance of including ownership and management, front office in that process, because you want them to be bought in and want them to know that there can be a contingency plan if you structure the organization the right way. And what I mean by that is, look for a quarterback coach that's been a coordinator. So if you do have a coordinator and you got a quarterback coach that's got offensive coordinator experience, and you have to get rid of your coordinator, you got a replacement, someone that's good that can step in. If you got to get rid of your D coordinator, look to have a linebacker, D-line, or secondary guy that's got a coordinator in his background. Heck, and for that matter, I would even encourage defensive line coaches to have linebacker experience, or linebacker coaches to have defensive back experience, because at any given time, if somebody's down, and family health issues, yep. Things come about, people get fired, but you now have a person that can step in and help in that area, right? And it also doesn't hurt to have multiple sets of eyes on one position. So if you've got a linebacker coach that's coaching the secondary, and while he's coaching his LBs, he's coaching his linebackers, he can also speak to what's happening in the secondary and say, hey, this is how and why we all need to be on the same page. I think that type of continuity is what can give your organization the best chance to be successful, whether someone gets terminated or whatever. You've got multiple facets in terms of background with your coaches at various positions, and you're not vulnerable, should I say, to someone getting fired, and you don't have any contingency plans.
Well, it goes back to originally what we talked about a couple months ago. What you're doing, it's this tool is designed to basically give you the leg up when you're talking about the most qualified coaching candidates and assembling the coaching staff. See, my fear now is you've got some very viable options, young coordinators, offensive coordinators, young defensive coordinators. And what happens? It's the Gruden syndrome all over again. His name's out in lights. He's the sexy name. We got to get this guy. And then you give him 10 years, $100 million, and it blows up in everyone's face. And you've got these young coordinators that you could have gave an opportunity, but we're just retreading some of these guys.
Well, you look at Jacksonville, right? Yeah. Doug Peterson, outstanding coach, right? Heck of a coach, won a Super Bowl. We all know that in Philly. What he does is he gets down to Jacksonville, and the construction of that staff is really weak. And then what I mean by that is it's top heavy, meaning he's a good coach and he has a coordinator that's a good coach. And then he's got a couple other guys that really probably shouldn't be coaching. And so what ends up happening is when you get into these situations late in the season, or you're in the playoffs, your guys are so inexperienced, all the pressure, all the work, for the most part, is on those upper level coaches that have the experience and who have the background to justify their grades, right?
Right.
But now what happens is, in those pressure situations or in the latter part of the season, and when you can't be in every room and you can't be everywhere on the field, Now you're relying on those same guys that don't have the experience, the success that you've had. And now it shouldn't surprise anyone when he has to come in and fire his whole defensive
Yeah.
staff, right? Or when he has to fire his running back coach and his assistant offensive line guy. And like if you construct it the right way, you don't have to do these major overhauls to your organization and essentially start all over again, right? That works for Doug Peterson, but it shouldn't work for Shad Khan, who's the owner, by saying, "Hey, wait a minute, what do we got? What are we doing here, and why are we doing it?" Go back to the point where I said at the beginning, which is involve Shad Khan at the beginning, allow him to be involved in that selection of those senior level coaches, so that now you don't have to do this total tear down rebuild all over again.
It's a great point you bring up. And just to kind of piggyback on it, this is what happens when you're 7-3, 7-4, 8-4, and then you choke up games and you go downhill. And it kind of leads me down to this rabbit hole now. The Philadelphia Eagles, 10-1. They've dropped 5 of 6 ever since Sirianni. And again, you know my feelings. I think a lot of it was mass last year with the coordinators. I think he got exposed this year. I think he's somewhat of a fraud. It's just my opinion. I don't like the antics. He tells
Tell us
everyone.
How you really feel, Rich.
What's that?
Tell us how you really feel. He's a fraud. Okay.
I don't think a NFL head coach that's worth his salt is leaving the tunnel of a stadium and telling the fans to shut up and get out. That's, to me, that's classless, and it bites you in the ass. They've dropped 5 of 6. Now, all we're hearing is the coordinator this, the coordinator that. I mean, listen, it's the worst kept secret in Philadelphia that nobody likes Matt Patricia. And I'm wondering, this is where I want to take it first. A lot of these leaks now are coming out that it's, potentially Darius Slay, who's a, good, very good defensive player, getting a little long in the tooth, never gelled with Patricia in Detroit. Patricia now, they made the move, as we talked about, defensive coordinator. You got Hassan Reddick dropping back in coverage over the last couple. It's not going well. So I want to ask you this. Do you subscribe to this theory where when you played, and if they brought a coordinator in and you had a gripe or beef with a coordinator, is it the norm or out of the norm for you to sit there and, you know what, man, this freaking guy they're bringing over, man, I don't like this cat.
And so let me understand this. Are you saying that basically Darius Slay is leaking information to the press about Matt Patricia's inability to coordinate the defense?
No, what I'm suggesting, that's not a bad theory, by the way.
I'm trying to put it together. So
you're a lot smarter than I am, my friend, and you played the game, so you know.
Okay.
What I'm suggesting is it normal in the locker room where a player has an issue with a coordinator, and all of a sudden he's telling his closest teammates, man, this guy's a jerk, this, that, the other thing. Is it the norm for the teammates then to not buy into that said coordinator because their buddy had an issue with him or has an issue with him? Is that too far off?
No, it's not too far off. I can see that permeating throughout the defense, should I say, when it comes to questioning play calls and technique and things of that sort. So no, I can see, a well-respected player, maybe having some difficulties or lack of understanding of a particular defense and asking questions, and it might get fed through the position room and then maybe to the defense. I mean, I can see that happening. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm
not far-fetched. No.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone back and forth and people are like, what are you talking about? That's ludicrous. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to think, like, for instance, I think towards the end of your career, or actually, no, maybe the latter stage of your career, wasn't Gunther Cunningham your defensive coordinator?
Yeah.
All right. Let's just say, for argument, Mark Collins, that was one of my guys. I love Mark Collins when he played with the Giants. Let's just say Mark Collins and Gunther Cunningham didn't get along, and all of a sudden he turns around to you and he's like, oh man, I guess, does it really affect the play on the field is my question.
No, it doesn't affect the play on the field. I think, you might hear Mark's case and understand what he's complaining. You then take it and say, okay, you internalize it and say, okay, how does it impact me? Because if it's going to impact Mark at the safety spot and I'm at the corner spot, I need to make sure I understand exactly what it is he's got an issue with to make sure I can do my job, right?
Yeah.
But essentially, by the time we've left the meeting room and onto the practice field, we've got that issue ironed out. It's a moot point once it's time to go play the game.
All right. So then second point is that Eagles and Kansas City game when A.J. Brown wasn't getting his touches, he and Jalen Hurts were having a cordial conversation on the sideline. Sirianni went over, but afterwards in the postgame presser, acted as if he never saw anything, even though it was pretty clear he was over there and involved. I believe at that moment, that's when he should have started to reel these guys in. And from that moment on, look at the way they played, changing coordinators, Hurts regressing, Dallas Goedert coming out and basically going on the record saying, we pretty much have put it on cruise control. You got A.J. Brown, you got, not wanting to talk to the media, back-to-back closed doors meetings with players only, and you still can't figure it out. You lose to Arizona, and then you go up the turnpike and put up that kind of effort against the Giants. When you look from a national standpoint, an outside perspective, what are you seeing right now with the Philadelphia Eagles?
I'm seeing a lack of belief in what they're doing. And once you allow that to creep in during games, now it's one thing to have that lack of belief on the practice field, but when you actually go into the game and you have people wide open, that tells me that there's someone that's questioning or doesn't quite believe what he's been told to do is the accurate thing, is the right thing to do. So that particular person is going to improvise or, jump something that they probably shouldn't jump, right? And get caught doing so, right? And so for me, there's a lack of belief in fundamentals, in their fundamental scheme. And you got to start out a season with a fundamental group of defenses that you live and breathe by, right? And then you can scheme around all of that. But if your fundamental schemes are being questioned this late in the season, it's a problem, right? When you've got Hassan Reddick dropping it. Now, there's nothing wrong with Hassan Reddick dropping into coverage. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I beg to disagree with people to say he shouldn't drop into coverage. Now, he shouldn't do it often, but if he is going to drop, he needs to know where to go. And unfortunately, he's not the only one. There's guys, and I've seen Emmanuel Acho do some stuff on Twitter where he's diagramming guys drop. He's actually showing not everybody, because there's a bunch of guys that aren't dropping correctly. Hassan Reddick isn't the only one that's not dropping correctly.
Sure.
And so when you're talking about some base fundamentals that you should have in your scheme out during OTAs and guys don't know how to drop, that's a problem. That's a real, and it didn't just start with Matt Patricia. In fact, I remember hearing about them thinking about making a change when they were 8-1. This was when they decided, when they were 8-1, to give the third down calls to Matt Patricia.
Right.
How dysfunctional is it to say, hey, on third down, I'm going to give you James' thoughts, Rich, on what he would call, and now we're going to hand it to you and let you try to pick of what James' play calls are, which ones of those you should call. I mean, it's the most abnormal situation that you can come up with, right? You're better off letting Matt Patricia just put together some old New England Patriot defenses and start over. But to try to take the play designs from Sean Desai, who got them from Vic Fangio, which it's just a mess. It's a bad idea.
Right. So I equate it, I'll bring the analogy to boxing, right? You start orthodox, you're a young fighter, and after a couple rounds, this ain't working. You have no idea how to fight southpaw, and then you start to switch it up and go southpaw. Your plan A is not working. You're desperate in plan B. So I believe the 49ers physically and mentally broke this team. I really do. And I also believe maybe they're not as good as that 10-1 record indicated. Now, you played in the league a long time. You went to the playoffs. You played at a high level. You played on some very good teams. When the playoffs are around the corner, you want to go this way. You want to be what Buffalo's doing, what the Rams are doing, Tampa winning a couple, not the Eagles dropping 5. Like, listen, I believe they're better than Tampa and they should win that game, but I would not be shocked if they lost this game. And I'm wondering, is it too late at this moment right now for these players to buy? I don't believe they're fully bought into Sirianni and this coaching staff, and you got a playoff game on Monday night.
There's a couple key players that are missing from that defense.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the strength of that team is the front, the O-line and the D-line, right? And so when you're talking about a defensive line that goes from 70 sacks down to 40, right?
Good point.
That's a huge
Drop
difference.
off.
And we cannot undervalue or underestimate the contributions of Javon Hargrave, because he was and is a phenomenal player, right? So letting him get away was a big problem. That Jalen Carter he's a rookie, so we know he's coming on and all that good stuff. But they're aging up front now. Okay, all of a sudden they just hit the wall, and then Bradbury stops playing well. Slade gets dinged up; he gets a concussion midway through the season, and now he's out. Hopefully, he'll be back for the playoffs. Having those guys not playing at their level, those corners, is a big deal. And then let's not forget the safety play, right? C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a heck of a player, and losing him was a big deal as well. No disrespect to Byard and the guys they have in there now, but C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a really, really good safety. So you lose those guys, and now you're saying you're going to bring in a defensive scheme that a lot of guys don't quite believe in. And so all those reasons, you're gonna see the outcome that you're seeing right now. And listen, I know they started out 10-1, but I can tell you right now that Tampa Bay coaching staff is one of the highest graded coaching staffs in the league for a reason. They've got some really good coaches down there. They know what they're doing. And I would not be surprised if Tampa Bay wins that game. Matter of fact, I think they will.
I mean, listen, I think Belichick kind of started off week one because it was all about blitzing, right? And you want to do that with Hurts. You know, the knock is he can't roll to his left. We saw the decision-making, couple bad throws against the Giants and some turnovers. We saw what Martindale was able to dial up. You got Bowles down there. You got defensive guys down there. I know Baker's a little banged up. I can see this game being a 20-17 Tampa win, or I can see the Eagles pulling away in the second half if it's a team that played in September and October. The problem is, and again, this is just me speculating. I think there's such a disconnect right now in the locker room where some guys are too concerned with their snaps, their reps, their targets, their touches, their step. Why, when you have an all-pro wide receiver in A.J. Brown and he doesn't get the ball, then the week later you force feed him the ball, or you've got Swift and he doesn't get the ball, then you force feed him the ball. You're appeasing to the player, and you should not coach like that, is kind of my point.
The Cowboys did. They appeased the CeeDee Lamb and it worked out. I mean, they were not throwing the ball to him. The first few games of the season, CeeDee Lamb was not very happy.
I'll give you that one.
You know, and so, look, the game is always about matchups. Yeah. Okay? If you got a player that presents a challenge to someone they're playing against in terms of a size advantage or speed advantage, you got to exploit that. And A.J. Brown is a matchup nightmare.
No doubt.
Any defensive back. Now, you can double him, but if you get caught singling him up, you got to get him the ball.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. A.J. Brown is one of those players. He's just that explosive that he can change the game in a heartbeat. You got to figure out a way, whether it's motion, whether it's bunch formations, rub routes, pick routes, to get him the ball. You have to get him the ball. That's all.
Within reason, if you're the quarterback too, you can't force the issue like you did in Seattle. Right?
No, you definitely can't force the issue, absolutely, because you can get the guy hurt, right? You got to have a balanced attack. You got to run the football. You're going to have to do some things that throw the defense off in terms of getting him the ball. But no, you can't just jump out of your normal scheme designs and your play calls to acquiesce to a player. But it is imperative that as a coordinator that you find a way to get him the ball. Absolutely. 12 to 15 touches easily.
Yeah, no doubt. James Hasty, former great cornerback, of course, with the Jets and Kansas City Chiefs, All-Pro, Pro Bowler, kind enough to join us for a couple moments. Listen, Tampa Bay's got some good secondary. They got a good defense, man. That kid Winfield, That's going to be a
Antoine
tough game,
Winfield
man.
has had a great year. Let's not take anything away from him, but the corners have struggled, right? Carlton Davis, he really
He
struggled this
gives up
year,
big plays.
right?
It's almost feast or famine with him.
Man, he gave up a lot of big
Yeah,
plays this year. So, if I'm looking at a matchup, I'm looking at
good
AJ
point.
trying to get him over there on Carlton Davis. But Mike Evans also presents some challenges for Bradbury, right? I'm thinking, hey, man, I got to get Godwin the ball. I got to get
Yeah.
Mike Evans some touches. And then, of course, we know they've had problems stopping the run. So we've got to try to get this run game going. And the Buccaneers have a decent offensive line. So running the football, trying to take some plays, some shots deep this week wouldn't hurt either. So
no, and Mayfield's a gamer, and we saw Taylor kind of carve up that secondary for the Giants. You got the Browns and the Texans. I mean, it's a great story. Joe Flacco coming off the couch and putting up these ridiculous numbers, right? And they lose their great running back. They lose a couple defensive players. Obviously, they lose a bunch of quarterbacks. I think Stefanski. I think everyone wants to look at D'Amico Ryan's outstanding job. McDaniel. I'm trying to think who else. Who's the other? Two other names escape me. McDermott turned it around. Campbell. Yeah. I think Stefanski, for all the injuries they had, and now to be
there's 11, no question. There's no question that Stefanski is the coach of the year. Yeah, no question. Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. With all the injuries that they've had, the defense still played phenomenal, despite guys going down and coming back into the lineup. But to lose Nick Chubb, I mean, that was early in the season. Devastating. And, and the quarterback play and all those sorts, to do what the Cleveland Browns did this year, without question, I would think that Stefanski is the coach of the year, and the assistant coach of the year would have to go to Jim Schwartz, without question.
Man, I love what they're building with the Texans, man. I mean, obviously that kid C.J. Stroud, you got to hit coaching. We talked about it. Coaching.
How many times, Rich, have we seen guys not hit the deep ball? I mean, and guys we saw Trevor Lawrence do that all this year. Yeah. He's just missing the deep ball throws, right? Or guys are wide open. C.J. Stroud doesn't do that. I don't care who it is, whether it's Tank Dell, right? Or last week they had I can't remember what his name is, but they had guys that were wide open. He doesn't overthrow them.
Nope.
And he's making great deep ball throws and putting it right in the box area where you want to see the ball thrown in the deep ball, when you're throwing that deep ball down the sideline. So for all those reasons, and it doesn't matter who it is, but the guy's a heck of a deep ball thrower, and he doesn't need to throw it to the same guy when it comes to accuracy. And that's the part that I like the most about him, is he's not missing the deep balls at all during the game.
And that kid Nico Collins is a player, that wide receiver.
Collins, that's the guy. Yeah, exactly.
Physical, man. Physical, goes after the ball. Listen, I didn't think, when I was watching everything unfold last week, and I'm like, all right. So I guess, it's not a lot of juice with Miami and then Buffalo. But then I took a step back and I'm like, who the hell wants to go to Kansas City this time of year and play Kansas City? And I think this is the one game. There's two games, actually. I stand corrected, where I think this could get ugly depending upon what's going to go on with the weather. I think Miami is a very nice team. And I'm being kind of respectful with this. They're cute to watch with their offense and slinging it, but this is a different animal in the playoffs. And now you got something you were trying to avoid, having to go to Kansas City and play that team, your former team, the Chiefs. Even though they've got some leaks and they've got some faults right now, I still don't see how Kansas City loses this game. I don't.
I don't see them. I don't see them losing the game either. I'm gonna tell you the thing that's probably most troublesome for them right now is footing. What type of shoes are you gonna wear, right? Because if you go out there in cleats, Rich, you're gonna have a problem, right? With the temperature that they're going to experience this weekend, you almost are better off wearing sneakers or like turf shoes out there.
So you don't slide, you can cut.
Yeah, because if you go out there and you lose your footing, it's game over, right?
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing right now is those guys figuring out, okay, How are they gonna attack this? You know, Kansas City's not typically a running team. The Dolphins are. So is Kansas City going to get away from what they traditionally do, which is they throw some runs in there, and then throw the ball with play action and things of that sort, trying to get the ball to Kelsey over the middle? Or are they going to change up and try to come at this thing where they come out and try to run the ball downhill on the Dolphins? All those things which are not what they are accustomed to doing, are they going to do those things? And I'm interested to see how they approach the game plan with the weather and the field condition.
And I think they're getting Miami at the right time. Miami's banged up. I mean, they're kind of limping towards where it's a big difference winning a division and hosting that game in your warm weather climate and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And Tua does what he does best. And quite frankly, his decision-making at times, I think he puts too much strain offensively. Like I know they want to run the misdirections here and there, but sometimes when he's under pressure, for a quarterback who I think he's a very good quarterback, but sometimes I look at the decision making, I'm like, where are you putting that ball? Like what?
Right.
I know you want to get rid of it fast, and he has one of the quickest releases, if not the quickest release in the NFL. But like, dude, come on, man, you can't thread the needle all the time in the double and triple coverage here. You just can't.
Well, it would help if they caught the ball. I mean, that part too, right? So
that's part of it. That works.
that's been a problem for KC all year. So yeah, it's
oh no, I meant Miami. Okay,
sometimes
with Tua.
Yeah, Miami. Okay,
yeah.
Is Waddle going to be back? Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be ready to go? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Tyreek, we know he's going back to KC, but he's had some drops, right? Say what you want. Minus 21 wind chill is going to change up some things. I can remember some games that we've had in Kansas City and games that we've had up in Buffalo where, you didn't want to leave the blower, the heater until the guys were ready to break the huddle, right? It was that important. The cold was impacting the game that much that, you could literally start losing feelings in your hands and your feet and that type of stuff. So it was just a challenge to get your mind away from the weather and the conditions. And so I know the Dolphins are going to be coming in town. This is, extremely cold climate. Most folks would think they're not going to want to play in this type of weather. And I think the Chiefs have to take full advantage of it because if they get going, I think the Chiefs can put these guys away fairly quickly.
Yeah. And of course we know about Kansas City, right? With their, offense dropping their wide receivers to your point. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, Mahomes put the ball where it needed to be. So I remember, Arrowhead back in the day, you guys had the turf though, right?
No, we had grass.
Was it grass?
They changed they went from, I want to say it was the early 90s that they went back to real grass.
Okay.
The early 90s, they went back to real grass. Yeah.
So then, you guys, what year was it? Was it 96, 97 you lost to Denver?
97 we lost to Denver. Yeah.
That was a low-scoring game?
It was a very low-scoring. It was a very low-scoring game, yeah.
The reason I bring it up, that was in Arrowhead.
That was in Arrowhead.
Okay.
Arrowhead, and it was very cold that game. We had another game like that with Jim Harbaugh as the quarterback.
What year was that?
95. Jim Harbaugh was a quarterback. Peyton Manning was a rookie.
For the Colts.
Extremely cold weather that game. And so it was another close one.
Yeah.
So we had a couple.
Yeah, that's when they went all the way to the AFC Championship, the Colts that year against Pittsburgh.
That's right. We were supposed to be the favorite on the whole nine. And they came in, Jim Harbaugh, which everybody was like, oh yeah, Jim Harbaugh is not gonna do anything to us. And sure enough, guy came in and competed his butt off and got the win for him. We missed a few field goals, which didn't help our case. I think we missed like 3 field goals, and that was the end of it.
That was another low-scoring game.
Yeah, very low.
Who was quarterbacking for you guys that day?
In 95, I want to say Steve Bono.
And Gannon was on that team too. Gannon was on your
Gannon
team.
was on the team, and then in '97, it was Elvis Gerbach
Elvis.
and Rich were the quarterbacks, and
Wow.
many know that Rich won quite a few games for us that year, and thought that he should be the guy to start the playoff game, but Marty thought otherwise and decided to go with Elvis.
How does the locker room respond to that?
Oof, man, you don't even want to know. It was not a pretty scene. Yeah, there were some guys that were literally ready to, cause harm to some folks. It was probably one of the most disappointing moments of my career,
Really?
to say the least. Yeah, it was easily one of the most disappointing moments of my career.
You guys believe you
Yeah.
had a Super Bowl winning team that year?
Without question. Without question. Without question. We wanted to play. We thought the Cowboys would be the team we would play. Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting you bring that up because I remember I interviewed Doug Flutie years and years ago, and I asked him, because similar situation, right? I think Rob Johnson started a meaningless game, regular season, and I think it was Wade Phillips decided to sit Flutie and start Rob
Mm-hmm.
Johnson in a playoff game, and Flutie built up all that equity, and he kind of was very political in his answer as well, with the locker room and how it didn't carry itself well in a locker room like that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to just remember, guys are trying to finally get there, and we're all getting up there in age, and we understand that that time we were trying to get a championship for Kansas City.
Yeah.
So I can still recall after the '97 game, man, I was just devastated, and I found myself in the equipment room, the equipment manager's office with the door closed, just crying my eyes out with Derek Thomas and Marcus Allen. We were just all, just devastated that that game got away from us.
Yeah, I pulled up those teams, and man, you guys were freaking. I'm not twisting. I'm just it. You guys were loaded, man.
Yeah, and so these guys this week, I mean, folks need to understand just how important this time of year it is. It's probably the best. It's obviously the best time of the season, but man, just the damage that's caused when you don't win in these next few weeks, man.
Because they're not the same team next year. You're never.
You're not the same team, but you know what's at stake, and you got one shot at it, man. And if you don't get it done, it's you'll remember for the next 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's one of those things where these guys know what's at stake, and it's more than just money. Trust me.
I do like the Bills at home. I like the Cowboys at home. I think the Cowboys will pull away second half. I just think the Bills are just kind of in that rhythm right now, winning 3, 4 out of 5 straight, whatever it is, going into playoffs. They've been there before. And I'm hearing these weird little leaks coming out of Pittsburgh that, if the Steelers lose this game, then there's talk of maybe not retaining or maybe dismissing Mike Tomlin. And I know what you're going to say, because I think it would be foolish. I mean, there would be 31 teams that would line up to hire Mike Tomlin. So what say you?
Rich, I don't think people realize how hard it is to win in this business, right? And let alone have the right leader, taking you in the battle each week. That is the value that a guy like Mike Tomlin brings, right? He's won a Super Bowl. He's been there. He understands what it's about. He doesn't get too high. He doesn't get too low. He knows how to manage the game clock. He knows how to use his timeouts. Now, does he make mistakes periodically? Absolutely. But I can tell you right now, there's so many openings right now that people would pick up Mike Tomlin in a heartbeat. Now, that doesn't mean that the Steelers aren't going to make a change, because they very well could. But I can just tell you, starting all over again and trying to do this thing from scratch is going to be very difficult for that franchise, and I would not recommend that. I can see them making some changes, but I can't see them saying, you know what, he's our problem. We need to get rid of him, get him out of here, and bring in someone else, because you're basically talking about a reset that's going to set you back for a good 5 to 6 years. So if that's what you're okay with, then okay, that's the challenge you're going to have.
I'll take 10 years of making the playoffs and 1 or 2 down years any day of the week, man.
Any day of the week.
And they don't have a quarterback. Let's call it the way it is. Their quarterback, it's we don't know about whether it's Rudolph or Pickett.
Or who it is.
Yeah. I think the Packers are going to be overwhelmed. Dallas, I hate saying it. I'm always like, show me something, Dallas, show me something. Is this a year, right? But all the pieces are in place. The question is, what are we going to get from Dak Prescott? And what are we going to get in the fourth quarter with McCarthy, if it just so happens to be a tight game, clock management going forward? I mean, the other day, explain this to me. He's freaking throwing the ball, stopping the clock. My best friend is a diehard Dallas fan. He's texting me. He's like, I can't take this. I can't stand this guy. What is he doing?
Right. Okay. Well, let me just tell you, this Green Bay game, I would tell you it's must-see TV, because the Cowboys have been very fortunate in terms of opportunities that other teams have not taken advantage of. I mean, the safety in the end zone, right? Just the other week, the linebacker misses Dak Prescott, wide open sack in the end zone. I mean, you can't. How do you miss that? If you make that tackle in the end zone and it's a safety, the way that game changes, it would just be ridiculous how quickly that game could have changed. Now, going into the game against the Packers, they can run the ball. Aaron Jones, they've got a decent offensive line. So there's a good matchup for that, for the Cowboys defensive line. We saw what happened the last time they played a good offensive line and a good running game against the Buffalo Bills, what happened. So we know that you can run the ball. And then you've got some young wideouts that can cause some problems. I know folks think that Deron Bland has had a good year, which he has. He's got a number of interceptions, but there's been some throws and some wide open catches that have been not completed because the quarterback and the receiver went on the right page, and it wasn't because of great coverage by Deron Bland. So there are, now we know Stephon Gilmore's got the shoulder injury that he's going to try to play with a harness on. But let me tell you, man, there's nothing like playing in a game where you've got some restriction on your body, right? That limits you. I don't care where it's at. It irritates you. It makes you think a second time about what you're doing when you have these restrictions. So now you're going to try to go out there in a harness. You're going to try to jam receivers. You're going to try to go up and contest balls. You're going to try to tackle. It's not going to be easy, right? Yeah. So I can see the Green Bay Packer game with their defense. They got Jair Alexander back, right? Really good corner. People are questioning what Joe Barry, the D coordinator, is doing over there with Green Bay. But I think this group, and forget about on paper, I think this group presents all the challenges that the Cowboys have had this year. A good defense that they're going to have to go up against with Dak. I think that presents a problem. Bringing pressure presents problems for Dak. We don't know if Tyler Smith is going to play, right? We've seen them having their fair share of problems up front with that with the offensive line and injuries this year. So that defense could stand toe-to-toe with the Cowboys offense. And then the Packer offense is no slouch. So I don't see this game, like as many folks may say, as a definite Cowboy win. I don't see it. I see this game going down to the fourth quarter and maybe being won by a field goal.
Yeah, you're making a really compelling case, and you're probably scaring the bejesus out of Cowboys fans. But also, one thing with this Green Bay team, sometimes the X factor, the extraneous variables is maybe being a young team where you're naive and you're a little more loose, right?
Okay.
As opposed to a team in Dallas that every year it's got to be Super Bowl or bust, Prescott on the hot seat, McCarthy on the hot seat. And I don't know how much stock you put into this McCarthy coaching against the franchise in which he won a Super Bowl. I mean, maybe he tightens up I don't know. I'm just throwing something at the sink to see, the refrigerator, see what sticks.
Mike's been gone long enough from there that, you know, I don't see a lot of the players. There's probably a few guys still there that when Mike was there, but this is not one of those things where the players are going to say, "Hey, let's go show Mike that, you know,
that's true." Yeah.
You know, this is a revenge game or something.
Yeah,
I don't see that.
Yeah.
But I can tell you right now, the Green Bay Packers are not scared, right? Because they have a film projector too, right? They can watch the game film and they can see the Carolina game, right?
That's a
they
good
can
point.
see they can see some of these games where they're going, oh, these guys are
the
right
Arizona
there in the thick
game.
of this.
Yep.
The Commanders were right in the thick of that thing in the first quarter. It
Yeah.
was not a blowout until the second half.
Yeah.
So what? If I'm the Green Bay Packers, I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing on film. Go back and look at those games that were relatively close, and then it got out of control. But I remember listening to Frank Reich after the Carolina Panthers former head coach after the game, and he said, we dominated those guys. He was right. They dominated up front, moved the ball up and down the field against the Cowboys until the latter part of the late third, early fourth quarter. I mean, that was pretty much the game. But up until that point, Carolina was right there. So if I'm the Green Bay Packers, I go look at those games, I get encouraged by what I've seen, and I come in here and try to run the football and make some plays when I need to.
I think one of the most compelling games of the weekend is the Rams and the Lions. And I'm so tired, and no disrespect to Matt Stafford. I feel as though the national media, the narrative is Stafford, Stafford, Stafford. How about the other freaking quarterback who basically a franchise said, we don't want you anymore? I mean, that's exactly what the Rams did to Jared Goff. And look what he's doing in Detroit. I'm pulling for the Lions. I actually had the Lions as my Super Bowl pick coming out of the NFC. And I've heard national people say they haven't won a big game. They went on the freaking road to open up the season and they beat Kansas City. Like, I don't know, man. I don't think I do not believe they're getting their just due now. I know they've got some injuries in the tight end. They run the football. They can sling it. Their defense is going to give up some plays, but man, I'll tell you that place is going to be absolutely rocking. You know, I mean, they haven't tasted playoff football, and I think they're being disrespected. And I think Jared Goff is being disrespected, and I think he's also being overlooked.
I like Jared Goff, but that offensive line, man, God, Penei Sewell, is he not? I mean, those guys have a heck of an offensive line. Okay, Ragnow at center and Penei Sewell, Skipper. That's a great offensive line. That's not a good offensive line. That's a great offensive line. And so with that comes Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, I don't know if you watched this kid much this year, but you talk about that explosive.
Yeah, game wrecker.
Jahmyr Gibbs is the real deal. I was questioning his durability when he came out of Alabama and whether or not he could take 18 weeks of this. But he's pretty explosive, man. And as long as they can keep him clean and let him get to that second and third level, you're not tackling him.
Yeah.
You're going to need help. You're not tackling him by yourself. You better have somebody on your inside. You take the outside and you bring him down that way. But one-on-one, I don't see anybody being able to tackle him on that defense. Now, flip it over to the Rams. The Rams present, whenever I watch a game, I'm always watching to see what are they doing schematically that presents a challenge in the passing game, right? Because the league, no matter what we say, we've got away from 30 carry game for backs. We're not seeing that anymore.
100%.
Those days are over with. So this is a passing league now, right? And so what do the Rams present that causes some challenges for Aaron Glenn's defense? And they've got some bunch and some rubs and picks that they do quite a bit. They do it up. They'll go in motion.
Yep.
They'll do return motion.
Yep.
They cause so many challenges for a defensive back to decide when that receiver goes in motion, are you going to go in front of the linebackers or are you going to try to go behind them? Right? Because if you go in front of them and they snap the ball, you literally block the vision of the linebackers, right? And they'll literally run into you, okay, when the ball is snapped. So you're indecisive. Do you go in front or do you go? Now, if you're going back, right, now it's going to take you longer to get to the line of scrimmage, right? by that time the ball is snapped, and now you got to try to come downhill. Well, now you're finding yourself going forward when you need to be going backwards, right? Because they're coming towards you.
Yep.
And so it's the weirdest scenario, but it's a creative design that Sean McVay has put in place for his offense. And it really is designed around motioning and really not just running picks and rubs, but making it difficult for the guy that is going into motion with the receiver, how he's going to maneuver through his teammates to get over to the other side, and if he can make it in time.
Like Shanahan in San Francisco, the misdirections, right?
It's a lot of that, but it's very unique and it's very creative because they're not just doing picks and rubs where the receivers are. When they're using guys to go across in motion, it's causing challenges for the defensive backs because there's so much space for them to try to manage to get through to get to the other side. It's an exact science. When we're talking about trying to get over there, you have to know how to go through and not block and cause a traffic jam, if you will, for your teammates when you're going there, right? It's an art, man. It's not easy at all. And so that is the piece that I see that Sean McVay causes Aaron Glenn, the D coordinator, is how are you going to match up in man-to-man? How are you going to maneuver through all these guys that are running around trying to manage their responsibilities while at the same time trying to get over there and play man-to-man or play zone.
So with that being said, you like the Rams on the road in this one?
No, I like the Lions. I like the Lions at home, and I like the Lions because I believe if they can control the game from the ground, right,
run the football
with that offensive line, and of course with Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yep.
So you've got him as an option. Then Laporta, do we know if he's going to be back?
I mean, he's banged up. It looks like he's going to try to give it a go.
He hyperextended his knee, but we don't know, huh?
Yeah. Could be game time decision.
Well, look, I've hyperextended my knee before, and it's extremely painful. I don't know to what degree he's done his, but you can't play. I mean, it obviously depends on the severity, but if there's nothing torn or anything of that sort, the MRI showed no tears.
He didn't practice today. He officially didn't practice, and it's Thursday.
Okay, because that's a rookie, but I'm gonna tell you what, he plays like a veteran, man.
Yeah.
And he's a very, very talented tight end. But I like with that offensive line, I like Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, St. Brown, I think, didn't make the Pro Bowl, but should have. I don't know who he would have bumped out of there, but absolutely fantastic year. I like the Lions at home, though. Absolutely like the Lions at home.
All right, let me leave you with this before I let you get out of here. So you've got Harbaugh winning the national championship. You got Saban resigning. Let's throw a dart, man. Do you think Harbaugh goes back to Michigan, or does he get wooed by, say, the Chargers, who, the more I think about it, they're not going to open their checkbook, or Dallas, or why? I still maintain potentially, maybe going, back. Well, not the Bears anymore because they're giving what's his name another opportunity, Eberflus. I don't know. Where do you see Harbaugh in the NFL next year?
I could see him staying in Michigan. I absolutely could see him staying at Michigan. It's really one of those things where, what does his ego tell him? Is it time for him to try to go win a Super Bowl like his brother?
Yep.
What really motivates him? I don't know Jim personally, so I can't really speak to that. But if I'm him, I'm looking at the Charger job. I'm looking at where can I go play. I have a proven quarterback. I've got a defense that I can do some things with. I've got some key players still in their prime of their career that I can work with and win right now. And then look at that division and understanding, okay, if I'm going to take that job, I've got to make sure I build this thing that's going to give me a chance to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's really what I'd be focusing on is, okay, we know what Denver's trying to do, and the Raiders are trying to rebuild, but I got to build a staff and that gives us a chance to win the AFC West and beat the Kansas City Chiefs. So I can see him going to LA.
And then what about Saban? I mean, I know everyone gave him a bad rap, right? What happened in Miami, but let's be honest, it was the Drew Brees fallout. And then no disrespect, I think they had to go with Dante Culpepper. I mean, who's to say he doesn't stick around in the NFL if Breeze is his quarterback? Dealing with the shoulder injury when he was coming from the then San Diego Chargers. And then obviously, they didn't pass the physical. He didn't pass. The doctors didn't pass him. He goes to the Saints. The rest is history. Saban, you think is pretty much done, or?
Oh, Saban from Alabama is absolutely done. There's no question. If Saban was going to keep coaching, it would be at Alabama, right? There's no reason to come back to the NFL, right? So no, Nick Saban would definitely not be walking the sidelines in the National Football League without question.
All right, so about 30 seconds, minute 30 seconds. So with CPAS right now, let's just say you're pitching with some of these head coaching vacancies, NFL owners right now as we speak. What's the elevator pitch right now to get on board, right? I mean, this is your wheelhouse.
When you say pitch, what do you mean? Give me more of a clarification.
For right now, for what you're doing with this is a perfect tool for these teams that are looking to fill out their coaching staffs, bringing in the best candidates possible, right? I mean, this is a tool that should be utilized at this moment. I mean, we know it's being utilized with some teams, but it should really, across the board, every team in the NFL.
I would think that every team in the NFL would want to know, hey, what kind of grade do we have on these guys that we're bringing in here, right? We're not football experts, right? Their review panels or their interview committees, they're not football experts, right? So, you've got to give them a base to start from, right? And so you've got to be able to say, okay, what kind of grades do we have on these guys? And then once you have that information, then you can go from there. But if you don't really even know with that type of success or lack thereof that these folks have or have not had in their career, why are you bringing them in there, right? I can tell you right now, there's a shortage of good coaches that are available. So you're seeing clubs trying to contact other clubs for the coach at the same position that they've currently been employed at. And so now what you're seeing is the club where the coach is under contract are blocking or preventing the other teams from taking their coach and interviewing them. And why is that? Because there's limited coaches. There's limited good coaches out there right now. And if you ask me, you can't take that kind of chance with your organization. You have to expand your views as far as good coaches. And you may have to go to the college level and say, okay, we're not going to find everything we're looking for here. Let's go take a look at the college level. And again, that's where CPAS comes in and goes, oh, well, they got a database that helps us. They grade college coaches as well. So what kind of coaches they have down there? Let's look at those grades, right? Because we know there's a shortage right now. And so I can assure you there's going to be at least 4 teams. What is there, 8 right now? There's going to be at least half of the teams, let's put it that way, are going to have horrible team design when it comes to their coaching staff. Horrible coaching staff designs because they don't have the resources. They don't know how to go find those coaches. And if they do go find them through word of mouth, they're taking a shot in the dark. They don't really know what they're taking on. And so now you're going to put this staff together that may survive 2, maybe 3 years.
When you start doing that, that means losing football and
it's just turnover. It's just recycling the water. We know all the things that folks say about it, Rich. There needs to be more of a concerted effort to really work on developing coaches, because you're going to have a situation like this more often than not, where there's all these openings and there's not enough good coaches to go around. There's not. I don't care what anybody says. All these folks are doing these interviews, and a lot of these guys they're bringing in have no experience, don't know what they're doing, and they're interviewing them anyway. For what reasons? I have no idea. Some of them have not won. Some of them have not developed any players. Some of them have not coached, but maybe one position. It's just a bunch of reasons. And you just ask yourself, why are they having them come in for interviews? Because these guys haven't been coaching, but some cases 5-6 years. You want this guy to be a head coach of your $1 billion organization, and he's only been doing it for 5 years? Like, come on now. It doesn't even make sense. We're kidding ourselves.
Yeah. Listen, I told you this how many times now? You're preaching to the choir. I mean, if you don't have the coaching staff, it doesn't matter who you
Let me
have
tell you
out on
something,
the
Rich.
field.
I can't tell you how frustrated I get for people like yourself who live and die with their franchises. They're like, man, I can't believe we can't. And it starts with the selection of the coaches. It starts with it's just that simple. Pick the right coach. You put the same emphasis that you put in the player, put it into the coaches.
I was going back and looking at some of the old school, in the heyday, like my Giants that I grew up with. I mean, you look at that coaching tree and those staffs, whether it was the Belichicks, the Parcells, the Cornells, I'm like, give me those days. But obviously, we're never going back to those
Yeah.
days.
Well, don't forget though, like the Parcells had a coaching tree. He had a coaching
Yeah.
staff. I
Yeah.
mean, just phenomenal superstars on that coaching staff. And you want to think that, okay, the folks don't have the Bill Parcells eye anymore, right?
No.
So what are you going to do? You got to find something that comes close to that. You don't have anything right now, right? So all we're doing is throwing money in the wind, essentially, is what we're doing, right?
And now some of these franchises that gave these coaches now a vote of confidence, probably if you gave them truth serum, knowing that Belichick, Carroll, Harbaugh, Grable, they're probably saying to themselves, "Oh shit, we should have waited a couple more days." Maybe Chicago, maybe the Jets. I'm just saying.
Right.
So,
right.
All right, my friend. Always great to talk with you. I always love absolutely. It's a thrill for me to talk some football and what you're doing with CPAS. Enjoy the best weekend in all of sports.
It's the best, but it's like a reminder that, dang, it's almost over. Dang it. Okay, here we go.
I know. I always joke in another couple of weeks, that means husbands and boyfriends have to get reacquainted with their significant others.
Yeah.
We'll do it again, though, next week, divisional round. Appreciate a couple moments, James. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.